Okay, so we need to tell our API to add something to our response header so that our browser doesn't complain when we receive some data from our API. So let's head back to VS Code, and what we'll need to do is we'll need to go to our API project and into our startup class in order to resolve this. And in order to add these CORS headers, these cross-origin resource sharing headers, then the first thing we need to do is add a service, and we'll say services.add CORS, and this is going to add the cross-origin resource sharing services so that we can use them in our application. And what we need to do here is give this some options. So I'll specify options, and what we can do inside here is say opt.addPolicy so that we can create our own specific CORS policy here. And I'll call it CORS policy. And then for the policy configuration, what we can do is again add another expression and say policy, and then we can start allowing things that are going to be sent back as response headers from our client to our client request. So we're going to allow any header, and we'll also allow any methods. And what we'll also do is say with origins, and then we can specify the string of our address of our client application, and in this case it's HTTP localhost 3000. And this means that any request coming from our client application is going to be allowed to use any methods, get, post, put, whatever it is, and also any header, as long as it's coming from localhost 3000. And what we also need to do, now that we've added this as a service, is we need to add this as middleware to our configure method, because we need to modify the HTTP response in some way here. And our HTTP response is going to have the CORS headers that we need so that our client application is going to display the data that we're receiving from the API. So what we'll do is we'll say app.useCORS, and then we can just specify the CORS policy that we created earlier. Now this should restart our API application, so do make sure that's the case. And when we go back to our browser, if we refresh the page, what we should find is that we now get the values displayed on our page, because now we're returning our CORS headers. And if I take a look at the values request again, what we can see is in our response headers we've now got an access control allow origin, and it's got the address of where our React application is running from. And also if we take a look at the console, well, we can see that we've got an error in this case, and that's because each child in a list should have a unique key property. And that's because when I used the unordered list in my list item, I neglected to give this a key when we were looping over this. And if we forget to add a key, then React is always going to complain about child elements not being unique on our page. So whenever we loop over something, it's always important to give the top element a key value, and in this case I'll use the value.id as the list item key. And what we should find is that we no longer get a complaint from React by doing so. And if I take a look at the messages here, we were also logging out the response from Axios. And we can see our data. Inside the data object there's an array of 3 elements, and these are the values we're getting back from our server. But also in this response object is we get the configuration back from our server. We also get the headers, and we also get some status information as well. And this is Axios doing its thing and giving us plenty of information about the responses we get back from the API. And all we're interested in at the moment is obviously this data object to go ahead and display these values on our page. So technically this is our walking skeleton finished. We've achieved our goal of end-to-end functionality in a very small way of getting data back from our API and displaying it in our React application. But there's one more thing I want to do before we move on from this particular section, and that's to add the CSS framework that we're going to be using throughout this course. So what we'll take a look at next is Semantic UI React, so that we can style our application as we go along, and we'll take a look at that next.